Welcome to Dadograms. I'm Jason M. Garrett, and today I'm going to teach you something the Navy taught me as a pilot, something I use every day in the cockpit, and something that you can use every day in your life starting right now. And for you parents out there with teenage kids, this is a big one. We're talking about how to think through risk. What you learn in the next 10 minutes may be the most important lesson that you can pass on to your kids, your coworkers, or even just remind yourself of once in a while. Because life is full of decisions, and every decision carries risks. And some decisions are worth it, and some are absolutely not. To be able to think critically about that can make all the difference in the world. So let's start out with a simple question. Is it worth it? That question helps us understand the risk-reward trade-off. Before we even talk about how dangerous something is or how likely things are to go wrong, we've got to ask, why are we even doing this? What's the upside? What's the reward? Here's an example. If someone made a bet with you on a coin flip, 50-50 odds, heads, you win $1 million. Tails, you lose a single dollar. Would you take that bet? I would, all day long. It's a 50-50 chance that you're going to win $1 million, all for the potential loss of a single dollar. You can't lose. But how about the opposite? If heads, you win $1, but tails, you lose $1 million. Would you take that bet? Of course not. You have 50-50 odds of winning $1, but you also have 50-50 odds of losing $1 million. Most folks don't think about the rewards and the risks when they choose to do anything. And they really need to start doing that. For instance, you never want to risk your life or your career for something that's meaningless, right? Here's how you talk about this with your kids. The next time they want to do something that you see as risky, I don't know, like going to a party at 1 o'clock in the morning, drinking alcohol for the first time, or any time really, taking drugs, or heck, just going for a long weekend drive. Ask them, if things go perfectly, what do they hope to get out of it? Then, after they thought about it and answered you, go back and ask them what they would get out of it if things went wrong. If the answer to your first question of what could go right is something like, I get a funny video, or I get to impress a friend, or I just wanted to see what would happen, or just have some fun, those rewards don't offer any real value, especially if in doing so, they can get hurt, get expelled from school, get arrested, ruin someone's life. The risk-reward ratio is clearly not right in this example. As adults, parents, leaders, due to our life's experiences, we can easily see that the potential rewards aren't worth the potential consequences. But sometimes our young folks, our kids, even our new team members at work, just can't quite see it this way. If you can teach kids so that they can understand from the beginning by simply thinking whether the potential reward is worth the potential cost, you might just help them avoid taking some dangerous risks in the first place. So let's consider an example or two. How about your child or a friend or an employee wants to sign up for an orientation flight in a Cessna 172. They want to pay $60 for half an hour with a certified flight instructor because they want to see if they like to fly. Sounds simple enough. The potential reward is that they actually find that they do like to fly and maybe want to seek a career in aviation, like becoming an airline pilot. The potential downside? Well, they're going to lose $60 and they might find that they don't like to fly. It seems like this idea has a lot of upside and limited downside. But how about this idea? What if they wanted to climb to the top of their school roof because a buddy dared them to do it? What's the reward? Maybe a cool video, bragging rights. But what's the downside? Expulsion, detention, arrest, injury. So I'm pretty sure the risk-reward ratio here for this one just doesn't quite measure up. So anytime you have a decision to make, as a great place to start by just considering what you can gain and what you can lose. If the rewards clearly outweigh the potential losses, it might be worth doing. But if not, then don't. That sounds pretty easy, and it is. But life doesn't always give us such stark contrasts in a risk-reward equation. And sometimes we have to put some more thought into it than this. And that brings up a really cool tool that the US Navy uses. Let's break down risk the way the Navy does it. And don't worry, in a moment, I'll step you through a real funny and simple example of how it works, and it'll make a ton of sense, I promise. So for those things that you still want to do that seem dangerous or risky, we first list out all the things that can go wrong. These are called the hazards. And there usually are more than one or two hazards to anything that we're going to try to do. So we write them all down, then we consider two specific aspects for each one of them. We consider how likely it is that something will go wrong. This is the probability that it will happen. Kind of like when we were flipping coins in our example earlier, we knew that we had 50-50 odds or 50-50 chance of winning or losing. So all we're doing here is just thinking about the chances that one of the hazards can actually happen. And then we're going to consider how bad things can get if they do go wrong. This is called the severity, where on the low end you may, for instance, stub your toe, and on the high end you may in fact die, just as an example. Now the Navy uses a super cool way to visualize this. They make a grid out of it. Here's an example of one. Isn't it beautiful? I know, it's daunting, but don't worry, this is extremely easy to use, something you can do in your mind without even having to look at the chart here as soon as I teach it to you. So let's work through a simple scenario to show you how all of this works. This should be easy, fun, and totally relatable to us parents out there. Let's say your kid wants to skate down a really steep hill, and they're not that good at skateboarding. Let's consider what could go wrong. Let's identify the most serious hazards they could face, and yes, there are several. The obvious one to me involves intentionally trying to get off after you've got going so fast that you realize you're in a bad situation. Remember, a new skater probably doesn't realize how fast they're going to accelerate, and that's when they realize skateboards don't have brakes and they want off. And if they're going fast enough, when they do jump off, they're going for a tumble. And there could be other things, like hitting a parked car, being hit by a car pulling out in front of them, losing control at high speed. There's a bunch of things that can go wrong on a skateboard. Believe me, I know. So anyway, we're just listing out a few of the hazards that are very easily recognizable and likely are the most dangerous. Now let's keep this simple. Let's just consider the first one. Let's focus on what happens if they're going too fast and have to jump off. First, what is the likelihood of that happening? Is it really rare? Unlikely? Possible? Likely? Or almost certain? Well, truthfully, I chose this scenario based on my experiences. You see, I did this as a kid. I was probably about 10 years old and I had never skateboarded before. I took my cousin's skateboard to the top of the block in his neighborhood, and it was insanely steep. It was a street that literally seemed to drop straight down and went straight along for almost half a mile. And as I stood up there with the skateboard in hand, looking down at all these tiny houses below me, I thought, you know, I can do this. So I put the skateboard down and I went for it. Just seconds later, I realized I was in way over my head. Within just a few seconds, I was going far faster than I could sprint. And so I bailed off. I knew if I didn't get off pretty soon, I was going to get going fast enough, I'd kill myself. So based on my experiences, I'm going to circle a 5 here. And if it was my kids who wanted to do this nowadays, considering they don't skateboard, it would still be a 5. It might be different for your kid if he's a professional or if he's pretty capable of doing things on a skateboard. But for my family, for me, it's a 5 every time. It's almost a certainty that I'm going to have to jump off before it gets going too fast in this situation. Now we're going to consider how severe the consequences are if they do jump off. Well, if you're going faster than you can run, like I was, they can be pretty severe. I went down on my knees and I skidded to a stop, scraping both knees almost down to the bone. To this day, how I was able to walk away from that is still a mystery. I had blood pouring down from my knees all down the fronts of my shins, and I could still remember that stinging pain. So I would say, based on my experiences here, that the severity would be probably a 4. Of course, people die doing this, and if I gotten going fast enough, I very well could have, considering this was the 1980s and I had no helmet on. But I think a 4 here is appropriate. Again, based on my experience doing a lot of falling throughout my life. Okay, so we've circled these. Now connect them this way, and we get a risk assessment code, or RAC code, of extreme 20. Generally, as a pilot in the Navy, we avoid anything rated high or extremely high unless the mission is absolutely critical, meaning the reward payout has to be extremely high and the risks are mitigated, which I'll talk about that whole mitigation thing here in just a moment. So, looking at this, the probability is pretty high that they will have to try and get off that skateboard before getting going too fast. And the severity when they do, well, it's possible that they'll get a broken wrist, a head injury, rash, skinned knees, that kind of thing. So at the moment, it doesn't seem like this is worth doing. Now don't stop the video, because I'm here to teach you how to still do it. After all, the whole reason we're doing risk assessment is to figure out how we can actually do the dangerous things we want to do. Just because something doesn't work out on the matrix the first time doesn't mean that we can't still do it. You simply need to think about how to reduce the likelihood of things happening and decrease the severity if they do happen. And that just takes some thinking. So, how can we decrease the likelihood that it will happen? In this case, we're still talking about getting off at high speed and tumbling across the ground. Well, we can start lower on the hill as opposed to up here at the top. That way we can't generate as much speed. Let's say we started just a few feet above where it actually levels out, just to keep our speed pretty low. That can help, and that can decrease the probability that they will get going faster than they can run. It gives them the ability to learn in a controlled environment, and it allows them to gain confidence. So if we look at the probability of having to get off at high speed, in this case, we may have mitigated the likelihood of it happening, and we might now only have to circle a 1 on the matrix, which is far, far better. Now, how would we lessen the severity of tumbling on the ground if it did happen? Well, we could always wear pads, wrist guards, helmets. If we do that, now if we did fall off and tumble, it probably wouldn't hurt as much. So maybe call that a 2. Once we introduce the risk mitigators, we decrease the likelihood and the severity, and we get the answer that is much, much lower. Now it's in the low or moderate range, and that is probably going to work. Now we can't cheat here. You always have to be honest and follow the plan to mitigate the risks. But if you're honest and you implement the plan and we can make it work on the risk assessment matrix, then we can do that thing that we wanted to do. Then next, we need to do the same process for each identified hazard that could get us hurt. Make sense? And that's how this works. Simple. Now, when I was flying in the Navy, we assessed risk before every single flight, actually using this matrix. We did it before every maneuver, every weather change, every deviation from the plan. And why? Because we were dealing with lives, multi-million-dollar aircraft, and national objectives every single time we flew. Sometimes we flew in hellish bad weather in the pitch black of night, thousands of miles from the nearest land, because we had a mission so important that they needed us to do it. We consider weather briefs, alternate plans, altitude restrictions, communication requirements, everything we could in order to mitigate the risks and still get that mission done. But if the mission wasn't critical and the risks were high, we didn't do it. Period. Now, if using this matrix seems like a burden, if you think that it takes so much of the spontaneity out of your life, I have some good news for you. You don't have to use this matrix for most things. By working through this process once or twice, you become risk aware and can think critically about all types of things you're considering, from outdoor activities, cross-country drives, investing, trying something new and innovative with your business, and so on. Now that you've been exposed, you'll be thinking differently, and that can make all the difference. And also, don't think about considering the hazards and mitigating the risks as living life afraid. It means living life smart. And by thinking this way, you can radically improve your odds of being able to successfully do some truly amazing things and actually survive doing them. Some of the greatest moments of my life came as taking a calculated risk. As a helicopter pilot, I had the chance to fly in almost every type of Navy fixed-wing aircraft in the inventory back in the early 2000s, something very few helicopter pilots ever get the opportunity to do. And without hesitation, I took every single opportunity I could. And as a result, I've taken catapult shots off of aircraft carriers in 5 different aircraft. And I've broken the sound barrier in an F-16. At Mach 1.3, I always like to say I'm the fastest helicopter pilot I've ever met. I've skydived, I've scuba dived, I've bungee jumped, I've climbed almost every mountain in San Diego County and on the island of Oahu in Hawaii alone. I've summited Rainier and Whitney. I've swam in the open ocean directly over the Marianas Trench, where the nearest ground is 7 miles straight down. And I've glissaded down Mount Marathon, Mount Adams, and Mount St. Helens. These are all possibly risky or dangerous things to do, but I considered the possible rewards and the possible consequences. And if the risks were high, I mitigated them to put the odds in my favor. And if it could be done safely, I did it. And that's what real risk assessment is about. Enabling you to do the amazing things, to take bold action when it's worth it, but doing the thinking beforehand to make sure that it's safe. So I recommend you learn this and teach it to your kids, and your employees and your teams, because life will always involve risk. But the difference between those who thrive and those who crash is how you assess it and how you mitigate it. Okay? All right. Thanks for listening to this Dadogram. And remember, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. So let's pass on the good stuff to our kids so they don't have to learn everything the hard way. Be safe, be wise, and be prepared.